Hello and welcome to episode 169 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, it was a bad week for fossil fuels not blowing up. Conversely, on the clean energy side, only a few people were electrocuted. And most of those were in India, where a TikTok trend sees people sticking their tongues on high-voltage transmission lines.
Interesting. A company in Finland plans to use small modular nuclear reactors for district heating of homes. So if there's a nuclear meltdown in the winter, everyone will stay toasty warm. If it melts down in the summer, then everyone will have to crack a window.
Chevy has debuted its all-new Silverado all-electric pickup truck. It's so big and heavy, Brian, you could drive it up the M4 to Moscow and not meet any resistance at all.
A company called Sublime Systems has figured out a way to lower the substantial carbon footprint of cement. Organized crime figures everywhere are rejoicing as they have been complaining for years about the excessive carbon footprint of concrete shoes.
All that and more on this week's edition of the Clean Energy Show.
All right, so I made it home, James, finally.
I see you recognize the background for once. It's not an airport hotel. It's not
Yes.
You're not homeless.
I'm back in the comfort of my bomb shelter in my home. So yeah, we did make it home. We recorded that day from the hotel, and then we took a 6 p.m. flight. And of the 5 flights that we took, that was the only one that ran on time.
That's wow. Just wow.
Yeah. So
when you say on time, you mean like days off. For some
I mean,
of the
sure.
flights.
I mean, we were 2 days late, but this particular flight.
So did you have to pay for a hotel in the city where you live because you were getting renos done?
Yeah.
Then you lost a hotel in the UK because you were a day late. Am I right? Did you have to pay for the hotel in Toronto when your flight missed, or did the airline pay?
Yes, but we filled out a complaint with Air Canada, and hopefully we'll get some kind of compensation.
Oh, man. That is so bad.
Yeah, it's terrible. So anyway, I'm back in my home, and I have a heat pump now. My heat pump has
Get out of
been
town.
installed. Yeah.
I mean, stay in town. Don't take an airline, but wow.
Yeah.
So it's up and running?
It's up and running. So we have been using it to cool the house. It's been about, 28 degrees around here. So I've been turning it on at about 3 p.m. and running it till about 8, and then, been able to shut it off. It's not crazy hot.
You have to make a recording of the sound of the compressor.
It is when it blows in the house, it's kind of loud. It seems louder, like a lot louder than our furnace.
Really?
So, yeah,
Is it the fans that are just amping up? Because we get high, our fans really amp up for air conditioning here, I know, with a very low speed motor.
I mean, maybe that's it, that it has to blow harder for air conditioning, but it seems like twice as loud as our furnace ever was when the furnace kicked in.
Really? Are you not hearing anything from outdoors, though?
No, that's fine. I mean, if you're outdoors, you can hear it. But the installation guy's coming back again this week to clean up a few things, so I don't know. I'm going to ask him about that. You can just barely see behind me if you're looking at the video of me. There's a black pipe at the top of the screen here somewhere. So that's the one of the pipes that runs from the outside unit to the inside unit. It's just barely creeping in now on the top of my shot here. So it's just weird that it would actually appear where I do the podcast, but it's here in the room with me.
Wow. Have you been tempted to try it out for heat? I mean, it's not any good situation to do that in unless you're up at 5 in the morning. Why don't you just try turning it on when it's like 13 degrees Celsius or,
that's a good
55.
point. I could try running it for a minute, and I could see if it's any louder or quieter that way, like a heating or cooling. But
well, that you might be able to find out.
Yeah,
well,
but that was the only thing I was concerned about. Is it seems kind of loud when it's blowing.
So come November, it could, and it probably won't because it's an El Nino year, but it could get really cold here.
Yeah.
And I just remember dropping down to minus 25, which is, like minus 22 Fahrenheit. And just, my windshield cracking in my car. And I have that memory from November. So anything can happen. But hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah, and I'm going to start the process now to get rid of my natural gas water heater. That's the next project. So I'm trying to get rid of natural gas in my house. So, yeah, just looking at getting a heat pump water heater. And the heat pump that I got has an extra unit where it can preheat for hot water, where it takes waste heat from the heat pump and sort of preheats it into a separate tank, and then it feeds into what will be eventually a heat pump water heater. So
Nice.
getting close to getting rid of all the natural gas in my house.
So as you cool the house, you still want some heat for your water. And are you telling me that it can recover some of that?
Yeah, that is exactly what it does. Yes.
So this is all an integrated system. The heat pump air conditioner also ties into the hot water heater, the heat pump hot water.
Yeah, like the heat pump water heater will be a separate unit that I have to purchase, but the heat pump comes with this sort of water preheating unit type thing.
Okay. And how's everything else with the house? Does the insulation on your roof go well?
Yeah, that's the other thing. So when we were away on our trip, we had somebody tear down the ceiling drywall in the attic half of the house. We did the vaulted ceiling half last year, so tore down all the ceiling drywall because it's a low slope attic, so the attic is too small to just have somebody crawl up there.
I was wondering about that. Okay.
Yeah. Somebody can't crawl up there and spray foam it because it's just too small of a space. So they took down all the ceiling drywall in that half of the house, basically the bedrooms, and they spray foamed it and re-drywalled. So, the house needs to be painted, but that all got completed, and hopefully we're on our way to having a roof that does not leak.
Did it leak last winter?
Oh, it leaks every year. I mean, it's it's an ongoing
awful.
problem.
That's awful. Because you spent so much time and money on it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's condensation in the attic, and then sometimes it's just, ice damming. Sometimes it's just water coming through. So,
So you spray foamed that bugger. You took off the drywall and had them spray foam it.
Yeah, spray foam on the underside of the roof.
Right. And you're leaving the insulation that's already there, presumably on the other side? Is there insulation on the other side, or is it all come down?
No, that's really all the insulation would have been sitting on top of the ceiling, so that's all gone now.
I see.
So it's
spray
it's
foam
now
is enough for a roof? Because usually you want an R50, 60 in our climate.
I'm not sure what the R value is, but it should be better than what we had before. And, it's no longer a vented attic, it's a heated attic. So it should be the same temperature roughly as the rest of the house.
Oh, you spray foamed the actual attic.
The inside, the underneath the shingle.
Ah.
Yeah.
And they can do that.
They can do that, and it's probably a better thing for our climate. Like, trying to have these vented attics seems like a bit of a problem. Everybody often, I don't know, lots of problems with attics around here. So making them conditioned, making them insulated attics rather than vented is probably a good idea.
Yeah, ice dams are a thing, aren't they? Well, hey, guess what just arrived for me? My Thermacell electric, not butane, but electric rechargeable mosquito repeller.
Oh, wow.
So you push a button and it comes on, and this little fluid in here, there's a wick that goes in the hole in the top, and it heats the wick right underneath the surface here.
Yep.
And then because the wick is wet with a small amount of fluid, which you pay $25 for, by the way, and it does a bigger area than my old butane one. So I can just stock up on the strips or the fluid rather, and it will last. Well, if I spent, money on the fluid, it would last me years.
Yeah.
So I never have to worry about supplies. I leave it on, it's okay because it's electric. I don't have to go buy more butane cartridges, which
Yeah,
stupid.
I'm surprised it's so small. It's really just like the size of a mug, but it's a repellent. It's not an attractor.
No, it actually repels them. So it heats the fluid, and all I know is it's FDA approved because I found a limited amount of information on how it works. It doesn't seem to kill the mosquitoes. It seems to replicate the pollen of a flower that they hate.
Right.
It starts with a C. I can't remember what it was, but it replicates that pollen, which is like deadly to them or scary to them, and they run away or fly away. So
Okay, well, when When you were talking about butane, I thought, because I know they have these sort of propane ones.
Yeah, I know I have one in my yard that's defunct.
Yeah.
And what it does is it creates, it uses propane.
Yeah.
And it creates a carbon dioxide, which is an attractant.
Yeah.
And also heats an attractant as well, which, brings them to there. Then a fan blows them into a net and dehydrates them and they die.
Yeah.
The horrible death that they deserve. I'm sorry, but...
Yeah. So that's the ones I'd heard about. And I thought, and it just sucks up all the mosquitoes and kills them. But that's actually a repellent.
Yeah, it's Thermacell, and it'll clear an area. Unfortunately, it takes about 15 minutes to clear the area, but it will clear the area, and the scent is minor. There's no smoke or anything. It just sort of, it's there, it's working. But it does work, and we had friends recommend it to us years ago. We've got a little one that has, little replaceable pads that expire that, get used, the chemicals in, and butane cartridges. And that's still great. We'll take that, when we're camping or on vacation or doing different things. But this one will clear a larger area, and it's rechargeable. And it's not very heavy. The battery in here must be very, very minor. So I don't understand why that is, but it seems to work for many, many hours.
Wow, that's great. I think I might have to get one of those.
Well, I'll let you know how it works, because they're on sale at Amazon now for 20% off, which is cheaper than your Canadian Tire. They're 20% off at our national chain hardware store here. But it was cheaper on Amazon by $5. And Brian, I went for the $5 savings because...
Of course.
Because I'm an eco-terrorist, and I had them deliver it. And, going places seems hard. So, Brian, I wanted to recap our letter from last week, which was from your brother who bought a lawn tractor, an electric lawn tractor.
Yeah.
He has an acreage, and he spends used to spend 2.5 hours on a gas lawn tractor.
Yep.
And I don't know. I wanted to condense all the advantages, because there were so many advantages when I listened to the show this week that I condensed them into one clip if you want to hear it.
Well, and I just wanted to add before you play it is that he wrote me again and said, "Oh, I forgot you don't have to go to the gas station and fill up a gas can. That's a horrible." And then, you end up smelling like gas all day, and he doesn't have to do that anymore.
Well, here's what he said in a letter condensed.
More compact. It's lower to the ground, so it doesn't have a roll bar. It can cut up to 4 acres on a single charge, but it's nowhere near as noisy as the gas machine. And the garage doesn't fill up with black fumes. It's very nice just to be able to push a button and have it turn on. It's nice not to have it tuned up, since it's a pain to get the big machine to the shop. And the best thing is I can charge my phone while mowing the lawn.
Yeah, so he's doing it. He's saving a half an hour. He's not filling the place with smoke. He doesn't have to put it on a trailer and take it into town every year to get it tuned up, as you do with gas engines. And, it seems like, the extra money's worth it just for that, because what a pain in the butt that would be. Because not only do you have to take it in, you got to pick it up in a few days.
Yeah.
So you got to drive back to town and pick it up again. So,
Yeah,
it's great.
And it was kind of an older one that really didn't work that great anyway, even after they tuned it up.
Yeah, most lawn tractors are long in the tooth. Anyway, let's get on with it.
Okay, so an update on the rollout of the Tesla NACS adapters. So this is one of the biggest stories in electric cars and clean energy for the last month or so. We've been talking about it on the show. And Ford and GM are the first ones. They announced they're going with the Tesla connector for electric vehicles. And we have some new people getting on board. So Volvo was the latest to get on board. That was just this morning. Volvo announced that they are adopting the Tesla charger for their cars. And it's kind of a similar rollout to Ford and GM. It's going to be with the 2025 Volvos will come with the Tesla connector. But before that, Volvo users can use an adapter and use the Tesla network before that. And SAE is a standards organization, the Society of Automotive Engineers. They have said that they will standardize Tesla's NACS connector, ensuring that any supplier or manufacturer will be able to use, manufacture, or deploy the charging port for EVs. So Tesla opened up the standard, but that's not quite the same as I guess, solidifying it by a body like the SAE. So to get them on board is a huge deal. And ChargePoint, so another of the charging manufacturers, has gotten on board now with the Tesla connector. So this is really moving faster than I even expected. You know, once Ford and GM went the Tesla route, everybody else is jumping on the bandwagon. So this really seems like it's going to shape up as the North American standard.
Yeah, and I feel like I have an obsolete car in the driveway, two of them, you know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of bad, but what are you going to do?
No, there was a story recently, I think it was on Electrek, about how the new Nissan Leaf, like the 2024 Nissan Leaf, is still going to come with the CHAdeMO connector.
Why?
Which is a connector nobody uses.
That's so stupid.
It's either CCS or the Tesla connector, but for some reason the Leaf, and even the other Nissan, the Aria, that has a CCS connector.
Right, but not the Leaf.
But for some reason,
too much trouble.
The Leaf, they're sticking with the
the Leaf's days are numbered, unfortunately. They're going to, the batteries have been so bad in them, partially for chemistry in the past and partially for not having active cooling in them. There's no loop that fluid goes through to keep them at from overheating and damaging themselves. So I love my car, but it's a dinosaur already. Yeah. I mean, regular car becomes a dinosaur slower because there's so much, advancement in the EV world. So looking forward to the Tesla connector on everything. I'll have to get a new home charger or an adapter for my charger. But this is years away and I'm not too concerned. It is the best way to go. And I'll have access to the Tesla network one of these days. A year from now, I might have access to the Tesla network. That's pretty cool.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think so now we're just kind of waiting for Stellantis and maybe Hyundai Kia to come on board.
What about Volkswagen?
Yeah. They're the other one, and the Electrify America network is the other one that has not yet jumped on board, which, of course, was started by Volkswagen as part of the Dieselgate settlement.
Yeah. So that's interesting. It'll be, Volkswagen's got to do that, too, because anyone who doesn't is at a severe disadvantage over the competition as far as, if I buy this car, where will I be able to charge? It'll be, really handicapped compared to everybody else, and that's not going to help them at all. Mind you, maybe they don't want to sell any cars. Who knows?
So this
is hard
all
to tell
happened
these days.
In the last month or so. So we'll another month will go by and we'll see where we are.
All right. Well, New York City, I found this interesting, is putting $25 million into electric bike charging stations, which is a concept that I barely heard of before. We talk about EV chargers on the road, but your bike charging, well, first of all, talking about standards, I don't think there's a standard for bike chargers. There's, slightly different. It's like a laptop cord, essentially. But there are different voltages and different, the negatives and positives may be different, and the size of the barrel that goes into them might be different. But apparently, the reason they're doing this is not to advance electric bike use, but because so many people who need those electric bikes are poor and they're working jobs like couriers in New York City. And when you're poor, you buy a bad electric bike with a poor battery from maybe Amazon that comes from China, and they're not sort of fully, vetted for safety here. So they're starting a fire, and a bunch of people have been killed, as we've talked about on the show before, in fire. I think 13 last year from e-bike battery fires. So they think that they can put these chargers around the city and it'll help.
Yeah, and even a bike like mine, I've got the Ride One up. It just doesn't have a huge range, which is fine for me. I'm not a person that needs a huge range for a bike. But it would be handy if I was downtown and realized, I'm a little bit low on a charge, to be able to top it up or something.
Well, you'd have to have a really long coffee because it takes hours to charge up. That's another thing. You think the Bolt takes a long time at an hour on the highway. An electric bike is going to take, 4 hours, 5 hours?
Well, mine is about 90 minutes. Like we rode we rode this morning and drained it down to about 25%, and then in 90 minutes it was up. But it's kind of a small battery.
Right, it's a smaller battery. So maybe it's an hour and a half or something equal for a larger battery. I don't know, but mine is pretty slow. And maybe that's good for safety. Like mine, I did get mine on Amazon, the NCM brand, but it was an established European brand that has been taking bikes very seriously, and you can tell by the components on the bike themselves. So that's interesting. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. If you are charging your batteries, you have to make sure you don't leave them charging, that you kind of maybe set a timer for yourself and unplug that battery after a while, just to be safe. And it's probably a very good idea to be safe.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, so we haven't talked about Finland in a while. So hello to our listeners in Finland.
I know you're listening, Finland. I see us on the charts there. Send us a message. Say hello.
Yeah, so I thought this was a very interesting story. This is from Yahoo Finance. There's a company called Steady Energy. It's a new subsidiary of another company called VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. And they're going to build a heating plant powered by a small nuclear reactor designed to produce heat efficiently, safely, and carbon neutrally at a considerably lower temperature and pressure than traditional nuclear reactors. So this is for district heating, which is something we don't really have here in North America, but it is somewhat common in Scandinavia and Europe, where a whole area of a town will be heated by the same heating source and pumped through pipes. So they're going to try it with a small modular nuclear reactor. I don't know. Again, given how long these things take to build, and of course, Finland knows all too well about the possible delays of nuclear power with the reactor that they've had very slow to come online there. But it also sounds like this would be a simpler reactor because it doesn't run at the same kind of higher pressures and higher temperatures of a regular nuclear power plant. They just have to get it up to heating temperature. So rather than go higher and try and make electricity out of it, it's just making heat.
Well, that's interesting. My question is, how big is the district?
Yeah, it doesn't really say, but I don't know. This is just in the very beginning stages. They've just raised a couple million euros as financing for this. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a particularly great idea where you can just do, solar, wind, and batteries and heat your house with electricity. But hey, who am I to tell the Finns what to do?
Don't you dare tell the Finns what to do. Okay, so instead of you're heating up fluid, mostly water, we'll say. Maybe it's got alcohol or something else in it or whatever to keep it from boiling. And instead of using that to make steam, to run turbines, to drive turbines, to make the electricity, you're using that to just put into a pipe and it goes from house to house to house.
Yep.
They suck the heat out of there and it keeps going until the guy at the end gets a very little heat.
Yeah. Well, I will say, I just realized I lived at a place in Toronto called the Bain Co-op, which was this housing co-op of sort of a series of townhouses. And it had a central boiler, like they were all heated by radiators. And yeah, that worked with some kind of, I guess that's kind of like district heating. I mean, there was probably 500.
Well, they have that at the university too, right? The one central plant with pipes going through everywhere.
Exactly. So,
Large
I
campus.
guess, a nuclear reactor might be overkill for heating the university, but who knows?
All right, it's time for the EV of the week. EV of the week. It's the Silverado EV from Chevrolet. They've put it out there. Your friends at the Straight Pipes did a video on it yesterday. They loved it.
Yeah.
They don't love everything. They don't love the Volkswagen ID4, I tell you that much.
Yeah.
Really hate it. They also don't like my Bolt, so screw them, because they're wrong. A huge 200 plus kilowatt hour battery in that. By comparison, a car with a 100 kilowatt battery is a pretty gutsy car, like a Model S or something like that with a big battery like that.
Mine's got a 50 kilowatt hour.
And mine, really?
Yeah.
I think mine's 65.
No, that's not right.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, the Bolt.
The Bolt.
Yeah.
The Bolt is 65.
yeah.
And it's about the same range. So depending on your efficiency and the weight of the vehicle, all that matters to things like that. Now, that means that it's going to take twice as long to charge, or, it has to charge fast, and it does charge fast. at least the best configuration of it with the biggest battery. They're saying that it's probably the same battery that's in the Hummer EV, which is a monstrosity that they sold all of like 8 or 10 of. They haven't sold. I don't know why, if they're just not making them, or if they're not. Whatever the demand for the Hummer, it's more than 8 or 10. It's more than what they're selling. So I don't know what's going on with that. But yeah, they demoed the work truck. You can see various reviews on YouTube now, and the work truck is just the base truck, right? But it's still got a big battery, still can tow. I was surprised that the tires take 61 pounds of per square inch of air.
Okay.
That's kind of weird.
Okay.
Even 40 is weird on EVs, when sometimes EVs and hybrids are taking higher pressure, but 61 is... Woof.
Okay, so you're a tire pressure nerd. Got it.
Well, I should be. It's important. People, check your tire pressure. It can affect, every pound can affect a certain percentage of your range, whether it's a gas car or an EV. So it's important. So it's got basically 50% more battery than the F-150 Lightning from Ford, their EV truck, or the Rivian R1T, their Rivian's truck. So 80,000 US dollars just for the work/fleet vehicle. And the fleet vehicles, as was the case with Ford, are already sold out because huge demand from fleets who want to be the first adopters to get their hand on electric trucks, probably for company image. Totally understandable.
Yeah, and I like, it's not ideal in a weight sense that the battery is so gigantic, but it obviously helps with the range, and it would certainly help with towing. Towing, kills the range quite a lot on a truck, and that's something you might do. So, kind of a mixed bag, I think, but it gets serious range, like over 450 miles.
Yeah, and that's in the 700 kilometers, so that's a lot of range. So even if you have to cut that in half,
for towing,
you're still driving for 3 hours and then, charging. So that's good. I don't know what else to say. It looks a bit like a Honda Ridgeline had sex with a Hummer EV. It's like, it's just kind of has that look.
Yeah, and the Ridgeline was like a unibody design, and the straight pipes said that this was a sort of a semi-unibody design. I didn't quite...
I'm going to leave it at that. It's a big-ass truck. You're never going to be able to buy one. You're never going to be able to afford one, but they're coming, and someone's going to buy them. And, there's nothing wrong with them. It's the reviewers are saying, hey, okay, no other truck can touch this.
Yeah.
The F-150 can't touch this, and no variant of any truck. It's the best truck there is, some people are saying.
MC Hammer can't touch this.
No, he can't. He can't touch a lot of things. He's even alive.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, MC, if you're listening, give us a call.
Okay, so moving on. This is a story from Clean Technica, also from CNBC. It's about carbon in cement. So this is something we've talked about before. Things like making steel and making cement can tend to be quite carbon intensive. And so this is one of the things we got to cut back when we look to reduce the carbon footprint of everything. So cement is responsible for about 8% of global carbon emissions. Just
that's a lot.
Cement, that's crazy. And
it is.
Cement is the powder that you use to make concrete with. So
it's the binding agent.
Yeah.
To put aggregate together and hold it.
Yeah, cement is made traditionally by crushing raw materials like limestone and clay and mixing them with iron and fly ash. And then that mixture gets put into a kiln that heats it up to 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. And so there's two sources of carbon dioxide that result from that. First is the chemical reaction that takes place inside the kiln that emits large amounts of carbon. And then, of course, kilns are usually fired by fossil fuels, natural gas probably, and burning those fossil fuels to heat the kiln. Obviously, there's lots of carbon in that. So this company, and the name of the company is, I had it in the headline there.
Wait for it.
Yeah, no, I lost it. But and now I've lost the story.
It's like a sneeze. It's just gone into the ether.
Anyway, so what they're doing is, first of all, using electricity rather than fossil fuels. But the main thing is they're turning it into an electrochemical reaction. So they don't have to heat it that high. So they're using electrons to push the chemical reactions, and it's a different kind of chemical reaction that they've figured out that can do it at, basically room temperature. And so heating things up to make them go is often not as efficient as an electrochemistry type of situation, which is more surgical and more efficient. So you heat the hell out of this stuff at 2700 Fahrenheit, you can get these chemical reactions. But if you use an electrochemical situation, that kind of does the same thing. So, Sublime is the name of the company that's doing this.
Sublime. Well, we got a message from someone on Twitter who listens to the show who said, sent us an article that says, meet the 33-year-old Canadian chemist, the renowned MIT professor who are building the electric vehicle of cement making. And so is that this? Yeah, Sublime. So it's a different. Apparently they hired a PR firm and got a bunch of press.
Yeah.
And it's only a matter of time before we hear from them. Well, maybe we'll talk to them.
They've got a 100-ton pilot plant running now. And so the next step is they're going to make a 30,000-ton per year demonstration plant. And so this hopefully, if this all works, this is huge. And as we often talk about on the show, different governments around the world are just requiring carbon to be taken into account with different industries. So particularly in Europe, there's rules around, the carbon footprint of stuff like cement and concrete. And so people are going to be clamoring for, a lower carbon cement. This is amazing.
They already are, and more as rules, and we get closer to 2030 deadlines and 35. Yeah.
And the other way that this has been attempted before, it tried to tackle this is often as a carbon capture and storage kind of thing. There is an idea that you can capture carbon out of the air and store it in cement. Like, this is a thing that's possible. It just sounds like it's not nearly as efficient and it's no one's figured out a way to do that cheaply and quickly. This seems like the better option.
Well, I hope it works, because we hear a lot of things and then we don't. And, the companies go out of business in 3 years. So I hope that I'm sure they're not the only people working on it. They have the best PR, perhaps, because they're getting a lot of press right now. But it will be great to see. And I know there's going to be advances in it. As always, will they come fast enough? Brian, there's a new Abacus poll that polled Canadians and whether they believe the wildfires in Western and Atlantic Canada and Quebec are at least partly due to climate change. These are the same fires recently from Quebec that they're affecting Chicago as we speak really bad. It has the worst air quality in the world. And a week or two ago, it was New York City. 68% said definitely or most likely. So basically, everybody is getting it.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not much of a consensus ever on anything, but you got to have your climate skeptics and your climate idiots and your climate douchebags thinking that, okay, this is weird. This fire, this choking fire, smoke is weird. It's not happened before. Something's going on.
And especially, I think, if you're at least about 30 years old, then you've been around long enough to realize, wait, this didn't used to happen like this,
I don't even think you have to be 30, because my kids say, Dad, the climate's changing. We never used to have this.
Yeah.
So if you're 20 or in your teens, you can remember when you were 7 and 5 and 6, and this stuff didn't happen.
Yeah, like I remember a sort of a smoky forest fire summer, maybe 25 years ago. I remember it happening one summer. And then nothing for another 10, 15 years. And then the last 5 or 6 years, it's been nothing but crazy forest fires.
I think all but 1 year. It's just bloody crazy. And there was no warning, We had a colder than normal winter.
Yeah.
So it felt like, okay. Yeah. What's going on in China?
Yeah, so this is a massive hydro and solar project. So this is believed to be the biggest of its kind. So we often talk about the intermittency of all of these clean energy solutions, particularly solar and wind. Everybody knows that these are intermittent. So the solution for this in China is to make solar in conjunction with hydroelectric. Both of those things are somewhat variable, but they're combining the two in China. And the first phase is now open. The first phase is a 1 gigawatt of solar and 3 gigawatts of hydropower. And presumably, since the two are combined, I mean, it's, I would think during the day when the sun is shining, you can cut back on the hydropower and then let that go at night. I imagine they could also include pumped hydro in this. It doesn't mention that in the article, but of course, if you've got excess solar, you can just pump the water back to the other side of the dam. But
that is interesting, and something you don't hear them talk about is turning off the hydro when the sun's shining.
Yeah.
And just saving the water up. I don't know how exactly that works. I'd love to talk to somebody about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the problem is probably very different in every situation is very different than another. But it's something that's very cool because it works in tandem.
High up in the mountains, the project sits at an altitude of 15,000 feet.
That is a lot, Brian. Hard to breathe up there.
The highest elevation for any power plant in the world. But like I say, just the first phase is open, which is already pretty large, 1 gigawatt of solar and 3 gigawatts of hydropower. They are aiming for 100 gigawatts eventually of generation capacity. So
let me put that into layman's terms, layperson's terms. That's 100 nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
100.
100.
And not the small modular nuclear, the big ones.
Yeah.
The ones that go boom and make lots of electricity.
So this is just crazy. So, I mean, it's going to take them a while to get to that 100 gigawatt figure. But even the current capacity of 4 gigawatts is pretty amazing.
Solar is going crazy. We'll talk about that in the show later on, too. And China, I'm not sure if this is in the show or not, but I'll mention it. I think solar has surpassed, in capacity, has surpassed coal now in China, which is good. The next story that I wanted to mention is solar power trumps Texas lawmakers as heat wave hits. A bunch of our listeners sent us this story to talk about this week. And basically, there's been some backlash against renewables and more subsidies for fossil fuels in Texas, which is blatantly corrupt, Brian. Yeah. They're not even trying to hide your evil. You might as well be petting a cat and sitting behind a big chair, Yeah. Like, it's just blatant, terrible, terrible business going on down there. The fact that they are leaders in renewable and wind and solar in the United States.
Yeah, it's huge in Texas.
It's huge, and it has been for a long time, and solar is catching up. And for them to make it harder for wind and solar and easier for natural gas and other things is just, it's disgusting. So it's ironic that they're having this, they've got a heat dome just over Texas, and it's expanding. And it's getting bad. We're talking, I don't know, I don't want to be specific, but it's in the 100 and teens. At least the feel-like temperature is in the 100 and teens for a lot of places. And that's everybody's got the air conditioning running constantly, night and day, and that's going to put a strain on the electrical system. So solar's coming to the rescue, though, because there's been, I think solar doubled in the last year or something like that. Doubled. And it's not like there was a tiny amount like there is where we live. There was a lot of solar.
Yeah.
And it doubled because of economics and because of the way that the power grid is, that the companies want cheap. And it has come to the rescue. Yeah, it has doubled. It's going to double again by the end of next year. Solar, if you've never heard of it, is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's taking over the world, literally. And people underestimate solar.
Yeah.
They think it's not going to solve our problems because it only works on sunny days. Well,
yeah,
it's more complex than that.
And even if the regulations are stacked against solar, it just keeps getting cheaper every year. So maybe
so what are you going to do? What are you going to do? If it's dirt cheap, yeah, it's just crazy. So yeah, let's get to the tweet of the week. Brian, there is no tweet of the week.
Okay.
Maybe next week.
There's
no tweets worthy of this segment this week. But I do have a new segment. It's not an every week segment, but it's a segment that we're going to have from time to time. It's called This Week in Combustion.
Multiple explosions of massive fire explosion. Just look at that.
Oil and gas doing bad things in just the past 7 days. In other words, since our last show.
Yeah.
Because we're weekly. If you're new to the podcast, subscribe now. Get our shows delivered free every week. Be smart. So this is all the wonderful things. I was moved by how many bad things were going on. And I said, damn it, we need a segment. This is just ridiculous. And the thing that set me over the edge was just 2 hours from us, not far from your cottage at all. If you were downwind from this, you would have died.
Yep.
or had a really bad cough. Lightning ignites an oil storage battery near Stoughton, Saskatchewan, home of Brian Stockton's summer home in the area. Fire Chief of Stoughton said the fire was caused by lightning striking the oil-filled battery around 1:30 p.m. The tanks with flammable liquids and natural gas caught on fire in oil and basically had to clear the area, and they're just going to let it burn itself out because what are you going to do? It's fossil fuels.
Yeah, so if lightning strikes an oil storage tank, it explodes.
Yeah. And, you know, if somebody didn't call the newspaper, no one would even talk about it. Apparently, it's a regular occurrence. A tanker truck carrying 7,000 gallons of gas overturns, shutting down the Capitol Beltway in Washington, D.C. That happened this week. A bridge that crosses the Yellowstone River in Montana collapsed early Saturday, plunging a freight train carrying hot asphalt and molten sulfur into the river water. That happened this week. Maybe you didn't hear about that. Ontario Provincial Police say a fuel tanker in the Canadian province crashed into the center median and sparked a massive fireball on Highway 401 in Pickering, Ontario, last Tuesday. Yep. 2 people are dead. Transporting fossil fuels. Dangerous. A couple weeks ago, it took down the I-95.
Yeah.
It's back.
And the Highway 401 in Canada, if you don't know, is one of the largest highways in the world.
And is the busiest highway in North America, officially. Yeah. China's Xi orders national safety campaign after a barbecue restaurant blast kills 31. Natural gas leak.
Wow.
Kills 31. That is obviously has the attention of everyone in China. A gas explosion on Paris's left bank late Wednesday left around 50 people wounded and destroyed the facade of a private school. And some people are critically hurt and will take a while to recover and may not. An 18-wheel tanker truck got stuck under a Manila footbridge Saturday morning, which caused its cargo of liquefied petroleum gas to leak for traffic to come to a standstill as well. No explosion, just a bunch of natural gas, just a bunch of gas leaking, liquefied petroleum gas leaking. Only a handful, contrarily, in the clean energy world, only a handful of people were electrocuted last week, and most of them were in India, where I've discovered, because I did a check on this, that apparently the regulations in India aren't terribly safe for electricity. Okay. And people get electrocuted all the time. So, hello, India. I'm sorry. Watch what you touch.
Be careful out there.
And there was a lineman working on a line in Michigan, and you don't hear about that very often. Usually, power workers are very, very safe. Anyway, that is my new segment, This Week in Combustion. And that brings us to the lightning round. Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Electrify America is expanding discounted EV charging for Lyft drivers across all its stations. So EV drivers for Uber and Lyft getting some serious encouragement to drive EVs.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And as I mentioned last week, we had, Uber drivers over in England that were driving electric vehicles. It's the way to go.
I think we were talking on the show, wouldn't it be cool if you could get a lawn cutting service to use electric mowers?
Yeah, I looked around and such a thing does not exist around here.
There's not one here. There's one somewhere near Cleveland.
Yeah.
I saw a Chevy Bolt, like my car, with a wagon on the back, a trailer that was an all-electric, all-natural lawn service.
Yeah.
So an electric car pulls a trailer with electric mowers, and which they say are charged by the sun on solar.
Fantastic.
So, if we could only get that, maybe we should start one here.
I mean, if anybody wants to start one, I can be your first customer.
Canada's explosive wildfires have damaged a forced carbon offset project. We talk a lot about offsets, carbon offsets. It is time for a CES Fast Fact. According to a new offshore wind capacity study quoted in Science Direct, there is 7,150 gigawatts available off the coast of the United States. That is, 7,000 nuclear reactors worth of wind off the coast of the United States, including the Great Lakes, too. The Great Lakes alone has a crap load of them. The U.S. goal for 2030 is just to have 30 gigawatts of wind by 2030 to meet their climate goals, and there's 7,100 plus available to them. This is some sad news, Brian. I hate sad news, but here it goes. A TV meteorologist quits after receiving threats and harassment over climate change coverage. He got PTSD from threats to him and his family, and he's decided to quit covering the climate. That story was in Iowa, and it was quoted on CNN. But he says he's going to work towards fixing the climate. When he's done, he's going to leave and do something else. Siemens is having problems with that is affecting up to 15-30% of their more than 132 gigawatts worth of turbines offshore in the world and onshore. Its total wind capacity is equivalent to 132 nuclear power plants, and they have some unforeseen problems that is shaking up the company that's going to take some fixing. Apparently, they screwed up. They screwed up, and some things are not working the way they expected them to. From Curb.com, a new bill in New York State proposes weight-based car fees, forcing owners of oversized SUVs and trucks to pay hundreds of additional dollars to register their vehicles. This is intended to push back against car bloat, the ever-increasing size of personal vehicles. One study estimates that for every 1,000 pounds of vehicle weight, the chance of a fatality increases by 46%. They are not excluding EVs from this. So, you'll have to pay more if you have a Chevy pickup truck, Silverado. It would cost you a lot, like many hundreds more than that. It does not apply to commercial licenses, though. So if you have a business or you're a fleet vehicle, it does not apply. A heat dome in 2021 reaching 116 degrees Fahrenheit in Oregon is causing Oregon to sue a full lineup of fossil fuel companies. That should be a new segment. Who's suing who this week? Zoox, the autonomous rideshare company acquired by Amazon for $1.2 billion, is starting driverless rides in Las Vegas. It's only starting with 1 mile loop trips around the headquarters, but this is interesting to me, Brian. It's not a car. It's one of those prototype driverless vehicles that we've seen, in sketches and diagrams from many, including Tesla.
Kind of a box on wheels.
A box on wheels, no steering wheel, no pedals, just kind of like sliding Star Trek doors to open up on the side, and you step up, a few inches off the ground. You can face forwards or backwards, and it's got, spinning sensors on it too. And finally this week from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, a new analysis from the International Energy Agency shows the current industrial picture for clean energy. It updates the agency's latest report on energy technology after only a few months, and for good reason, because clean tech manufacturing is expanding so fast that solar and battery manufacturing capacity are now on track to meet the 2030 milestone set out in the IEA scenario for net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. In other words, it is a milestone that they have to meet, a benchmark to be on track to do that. And the manufacturing for the solar and battery part of it are on track, but there's other components, obviously, like wind. 2 years ago, the existing capacity for making solar, wind, and heat pump technology could have provided a quarter of the equipment needed to be on track for net zero per the IEA. 2 years ago, and now we're on track. But that same year, the capacity for making batteries and hydrogen electrolyzers was far below what a net zero pathway would require. The second variable is the speed with which capacity has expanded since 2021. Solar has grown the most, as you can imagine if you've ever listened to our podcast. It is already up to levels consistent with net zero by the end of 2022. 8 freaking years early. And in this year's announcements, the solar capacity would comfortably exceed the deployment needs of the IEA's model in 2030 as of this year's announcements of what's coming online. I mean, that's incredible. It's incredible. And people say, you know, they want their own thing, but solar is taking over the world whether you like it or not. It's economics. Battery making ability grows from 6 to 97% of net zero levels, including first quarter announcements. Electrolyzers are behind. On the other hand, heat pumps and wind have not grown to their 21 capacity very much yet. So we are behind on the wind and heat pumps. But I think heat pumps are a smaller scale thing and they'll take off faster. Wind only gets 29% of what net zero pathway would require at the end of the decade, but that is changing fast. Check back in a few months and things could be very different. That is our show, Brian, for this week, and what a show it was. Always great to join you. It is hot and summery. I was in the pool this morning, and one day this will all go away. And it'll be cold, and your heat pump will be working or not working.
Yeah.
You'll be a popsicle or comfortable. We'll see. I look forward to November or December. It's going to be, you have to subscribe to the podcast just for that to see if Brian survives. Please take the time to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. That's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. That's our email. That's the best way to contact us. There's a bunch of other ways in your show notes. Nobody reads show notes. I saw a survey on that, but we have show notes. You can go look at your show notes. And we're on Twitter. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. Well, there's really nowhere we're not except Facebook. I refuse to go on Facebook for now. Yeah. We also got a store. I'm wearing the Clean Energy Show hat. It is wonderful, comfortable. It makes me 10% smarter. And if you're new to the show, like I said, subscribe because you get podcasts delivered every week. And we send them there. Whether you like them or not, you can listen to them. But I suggest you do because, you know, the world's changing fast. We'll see you next time.
See you next week.
The Clean Energy Show.